Day 159.1, I'm calling this Onshoring Vietnam. And the history of empires, 50 years or 100 years after the true history is being told of empires, you understand things through the realities of what really went into making decisions, huge decisions that affected millions of people's lives. And really the story of opium I've talked about with the British Raj and before that the Company Raj and how that really determined British policy and British really hegemony throughout the world for 350 years. And it's no different for the American empire. From 1946 to 1973, we used opium from China, which gradually got forced into Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Bangladesh. Later in 79, we made the gradual switch over to Pakistan and Afghanistan, and which culminated in a large movement of production to Afghanistan and Pakistan in the 80s, and even a larger increase in the 2000s with the Afghan war. And it really is seeing history through this full flight of the arrow, this full history that we really come about understanding what really happened. And this documentary here, The Most Dangerous Man in America, Daniel Ellsberg leaking the Pentagon Papers, really does tell a great story of from 1946 to 1973 through documents, through 7,000 pages of Pentagon Papers of exactly that history. In my series, it's been really to pick it up from 1973 to now and demonstrate and graphically illustrate the full effects of the decision to really the decision was onshoring Vietnam to America. And I know how hard this will be for people to believe. Just as Operation Duck Soup and bringing heroin through the DMZ to GIs in the millions was hard to believe, getting American boys hooked on heroin. I know that Operation Duck Soup still people can't accept that that was a reality. And they're going to find it even harder to accept that in 1973, with the formation of the DEA, there was a conclave within the DEA that was focused on onshoring drugs to America. And I know how difficult that will be to believe, but that is what we're going to talk about. As yesterday demonstrated, I started here toward the end of the day with Kissinger. We still have the same people involved that made those decisions all that length of time ago about onshoring opium to America and how the special forces were brought back to work with the different Hmong intelligence officers that worked with the Hmong tribes that raised the opium and so forth. And this whole series really is this one man from 1973 entering Vietnam to right now still having an effect on America through all sorts of proxies, through Russian proxies, through Pakistani proxies, through all kinds of constructs like the SES, like the CIA and so forth, and even the FBI and even fake news. So it really was a great documentary to watch because I saw so many similarities in what we're doing here in this series. The big difference being Daniel Ellsberg dumping all 7,000 documents at once, and our series is more 1 or 2 or 3 pages a day, and where we're more inducing what is in the documents, and then people are gradually leaking and proving that we are correct. So I'm going to play it here, and I talked about Henry Kissinger first being given classified documents by Daniel Ellsberg, and I'll play that clip of right here.
Opportunity to tell him something that I'd long thought of telling somebody who was about to enter the world of really high secrecy. And I said, Henry, you're about to get a lot of clearances higher than top secret that you did not know existed. That's going to have a sequence of effects on you. First, a great exhilaration that you're getting all this amazing information that you didn't know even existed. And the next phase is you'll feel like a fool for not having known of any of this. But that won't last long. Very soon, you'll come to think that everyone else is foolish. What would this expert be telling me if he knew what I knew? So in the end, you stop listening to them.
And that really is the story of all those clearances above top secret that we had talked about earlier. And I was struck by just Ellsberg's focus on documents, documents, documents. And here he is talking about those documents.
Said he'd like to discuss it with me, but he was shortly leaving. And if I was willing to come with him, we could talk about it on the way. So to show how desperate I was at this point, I was paying for a trip to California just to talk with this representative.
And he had a passion about him, an intensity, I guess is the best way I'd describe him. He didn't smile much. He was deadly serious, wanting me to understand these documents.
I thought then, and I think more now than before, that documents had a power to be taken seriously and to attract attention that nothing else did.
I think all of us, knowing that...
And really, my focus has been so much the same. The difference being that Ellsberg didn't have the response of the deep state to suppress. So I'm going to fast forward here later where the New York Times and so forth are willing participants to help release the documents, as well as Walter Cronkite eventually.
If at all. This could be the end unless other newspapers were willing to defy the government. I had heard that Senator Mike Gravel would do a daily filibuster until the draft expired.
Well, I'm just chugging along with my filibuster, and I get a phone call, and I don't know who it is. He says immediately, "Is this Senator Gravel?" I said, "Yes, it is." He says, "Would you read the Pentagon Papers as part of your filibuster?" I said, "Yes. Now please hang up."
As I put it to him over the phone, if you're really going to do a filibuster, I can give you material that'll keep you busy reading until Christmas.
The person who physically gave me the papers was Ben Begdickian. He was the...
And so then the heroes were the Washington Post. The New York Times first printed it, but then as the Pentagon Papers broke, Walter Cronkite finally interviews Ellsberg, and then a slew of papers then follow. And then it became too big of a story to cap. And I know, again, how difficult this is for people to believe, but the same thing is going to happen in our case. The whole flight of history from the Alwans and the drug onshoring Vietnam and onshoring the Afghan war from Gladio is going to come out in the press. Now, maybe not these papers, maybe the alternative media. But I think now the alternative media sees the structure of what happened. They see Kissinger's act. They see the people that were involved in Gladio. I'm not saying Steve Pachenik was involved in Gladio in Italy, but they see the Navy intelligence fingers in this, the machinations and so forth. They see how the intel agencies were infiltrated, and Brennan being brought into Afghanistan the drug business in the 70s and then brought up in the 80s. And they now see how really McCabe and these minions are really children of Brennan. They're his pride and joy, not so much Comey, but certainly Andrew McCabe is certainly a part of that. They see the intermediaries that were used between Kislyak and, let's say, Clinton and so forth. They see how the Awans fit into this piece. They see how the fake news fits into this. And now once the alternative media sees this, it'll become more obvious every day. New documents will come every day. For primarily, I thought at the beginning that people would willingly come forward and leak information, sort of leaking 1 or 2 Pentagon paper pages a day. But that's been the opposite. It's actually been true. People don't want to go to jail for someone else. They don't want to go to jail for somebody else's misguided policy decisions. They don't want to go to jail for someone who was brought in to do influence campaigns and infiltrate the United States intel agencies, all the intel agencies, as well as the FBI and the SES. They don't want to go to jail for these people. That has been the driving force. So on to Wisconsin, and we're going to take this directly to Paul Ryan. and every congressman who will stand in the way of revealing the truth to the people of the United States.